Beetlejuice, this isn't what I had in mind.
Hey, lighten up, Lids. Nobody's leaving empty-handed.
He stole the money from the rich and gave it to the peasants. Then he stole it back from them and gave them rocks as presents.
You're giving them rocks?
Why not? They look like solid investments to me.
Robin Hood is just a crook. Robin Hood, he's such a schnook. Robin Hood, the so-called hero. Robin Hood, the big fat zero.
Well, Beetlejuice is having a bit of a moment. 36 years after the original Tim Burton-directed, Michael Keaton starring supernatural comedy, we have its sequel, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, which has done great in the box office and reviews trend towards positive. Personally, I didn't care for it. It had its moments, but the pacing was terrible. It took an hour before the plot actually kicked in. Monica Bellucci, the latest in a line of Burton crowbarring his hot wives into his movies, her subplot was completely superfluous and resolved the second it became relevant. And oh my god, they're doing the entire song, aren't they? What's interesting about the film is the return of Beetlejuice as an outright villain. A gross, perverted sex pest who still has the hots for Lydia Deetz and schemes to make her his. It's very in line with the first film, but these last 36 years have done a lot to soften the image of the ghost with the most, and the movie accommodates for almost none of it. Beetlejuice became a fixture at Universal Studios with his walk-around character and his Graveyard Review theater show, where he hangs out with a bunch of classic horror monsters like Dracula and the Wolfman, real family-friendly cheeseball stuff. There was the Broadway musical, which reimagined the character as a bit of a pathetic loser and gives him a little redemption arc near the end. And, of course, there was the Beetlejuice cartoon, which originally ran from 1989 to 1991, before entering syndication and rerunning on Nickelodeon between 1994 and 1998. The animated series completely revamps the character dynamics, making Beetlejuice a Looney Tunes-esque trickster, Lydia a more upbeat, less suicidal goth, and the two of them platonic best buds, having fun little adventures in the netherworld. I was one of those kids who was introduced to Beetlejuice through the cartoon, and was surprised when I finally watched the original film and found the bio-exorcist was not a goofy undead clown, but the grossest guy at the strip club. So let's take a look back at the animated show and see what Beetlejuice could be when he's on his best behavior. Robbin Juice of Sherweird Forest is the 58th episode of Beetlejuice's 4th season, the 87th episode overall, and was written by David Finley, who also worked on shows like Rupert, Dog City, and Tales of the Crypt Keeper. Originally airing on Fox Kids on November 27, 1991, this episode follows the late series trend of our spooky heroes spoofing on popular stories like The Wizard of Oz, or Moby Dick, or, in this case, Robin Hood. Beetlejuice and Lydia are enjoying a night of televised wrestling when it's interrupted by a news bulletin. Prince John Don Juan, the Sherweird florist, is taxing his citizens for everything they have. Lydia is appalled, but Beetlejuice is a bit too self-centered to care. That is, until he learns that the Sherweird forest is the largest producer of the beetles the ghost often makes a meal of.
Look at it, Lids. Roach resorts as far as the eye can see. I've never seen anything more beautiful. Have you?
Never.
They check into a room and seal their doom. Up until now, I had no idea where beetles came from. You see, nobody's ever told me about the birds and the beetles.
But even then, Beetlejuice doesn't feel too motivated to help out. Even Lydia can't seem to coerce him into doing the right thing. Thankfully, there's a little dog minstrel guy who casts Beetlejuice in the role of a heroic outlaw who will steal from the rich and give to the poor. Yes, it's everyone's favorite socialist terrorist, Robin Hood.
I'll tell you what you're supposed to do, you immensely ignorant boor. You steal the money from the rich and give it to the poor.
Steal from the rich? I think I like this guy.
So with a couple of Beetlejuice's neighbors cast as Robin Hood's merry men, our gruesome heroes start robbing all of Prince Don Juan's money, taking on his right-hand man, the Sheriff of Rottingham. Being the only girl in the story, Lydia gets kidnapped to play the Maid Marian role, and Beetlejuice has to storm the castle to save her.
I challenge you to a duel. Short
green, and ugly.
I'm not ugly. I'm just off-model.
So, how much you enjoy this episode and the Beetlejuice cartoon as a whole is going to depend on one thing. How much do you like puns? Because to love this iteration of the Juice is to love an endless parade of puns and sight gags.
He's right. This isn't my brand. This is my brand. Yeah! Oh, guess he doesn't like smoked ham. What do you say we beat it?
Good idea.
These are the finest fighting swords in all the land.
We shouldn't even start this fight. You can't win. You don't even have a point.
Blah, blah, blah. You're so dull, you know that?
Pointless.
Dull.
Pointless.
They are kind of edgy, aren't they?
I'm a dork. I'm totally down for many a good pun. But there are a lot of puns in this thing. And I know pun tolerance levels can vary wildly. And it's definitely not the comedy of the original film. The OG Beetlejuice was sarcastic and crass and shocking, but I don't think he ever made a single pun in that movie. Not even this scene where he's covered in pointy things and waltzing over to a whorehouse. He doesn't go, "Oh, I'm so horny." However, Beetlejuice does deliver a few puns in the 2024 sequel, which makes me think the tiniest bit of influence from all these iterations actually slipped through.
Look, dig deep and spill your guts, okay? Who wants to go first? Huh? All right, I will.
On the flip side of things, this episode emphasizes more than most that even their version of Beetlejuice isn't the best of guys. Yeah, he's way more goofy and a lot less rapey than his movie counterpart, but he never really clicks into the heroic role of Robin Hood, trying to find every loophole he can to keep the money and screw over the starving peasants.
Here's your check, you lucky peasant, you.
Check? I can't cash this. I don't have a bank account.
No problemo. Welcome to BJ's Bank, where you get a free toaster with every new account. Oof. Oh.
I don't need a toaster. I don't have any bread.
What? No bread? Then why are you wasting my time?
And he just never comes around to being a good guy here. Lydia doesn't teach him a valuable lesson about sharing. After the sheriff of Rottingham is defeated, the big pig takes up the role of Robin Hood himself, because now Beetlejuice is the so-called rich that needs to be stolen from. The episode ends with things getting stuck in a cyclical loop of the rich and the Robin Hood swapping places, and the peasants never seeing a cent. It's surprisingly cynical, and it's in that way that the cartoon lines up with the movie. There are episodes where Beetlejuice does step up and become the hero, but not all the time. And there is something kind of neat about a cartoon of this vintage, where its protagonist is selfish, greedy, and doesn't learn a lesson at the end. Daffy Duck doesn't learn a lesson at the end of his cartoons. Why should Beetlejuice? I think Robin Juice of Sherweird Forest is a pretty good episode. Very silly, very fun, but your mileage may vary depending on your sense of humor, your pun tolerance. And I think it's fascinating to contrast it with the original film. Imagine Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice doing Robin Hood like he wandered onto a holodeck episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Prince John, nice pile of gold you got there, fucker. Want to trade it all for Maid Marian? She's, used goods, if you know what I mean. One day, Knacks will do a full episode of the Beetlejuice cartoon, and we can unpack this bizarre franchise fully. But for now, this was just a sample.